In much the same way that last week's video on the U.S. state capitals, part 1, focused on the geography of the state capitals, we're going to magnify the lens here and focus in on the state of Indiana and the courthouses that exist there. And you can see this is a map of the locations of these courthouses. And the question comes about in this field of research: are we looking at a pre-existing grid? And is there a pattern to these capital locations? Is there much more to the story? Now, very briefly, the state of Indiana doesn't become a state until, it says here, December 11th, 1816. Initially was a territory signed in 1800, we are told, by President John Adams. And you can see here Indiana Territory encompassing much of the Great Lakes region up into Minnesota area, Illinois here, some of Michigan, and Wisconsin as well. And history tells us this gentleman here, William Henry Harrison, was the first governor of the Indiana Territory and ends up in a battle, really, with Tecumseh. An interesting character in the storyline in this region here, if you're familiar with Tecumseh's Comet. We have some strange occurrences going on in that time period, we are told. The Great Comet of 1811 was dubbed Tecumseh's Comet, or Napoleon's Comet, depending on which side of the Atlantic you were on at the time. Apparently it was seen as a sign by Tecumseh's people that they were going to succeed in their war to regain control of the Indiana Territory. It was unsuccessful, however. And not to simplify that story, but there's much more to it. I have touched on it in previous videos. But it's certainly worth a deeper dive. It coincides with the New Madrid earthquakes in 1811 as well. Some say the Mississippi River turned around right at the junction of Ohio and Mississippi River, which is all along the southern border of Indiana. You can see here this is a progression of the map of Indiana down through time, since statehood, really, where all these counties take shape. And it just makes me wonder if we are witnessing the reclaiming of these lands, and when we put it through the lens of the old world, where a lot of this infrastructure already there as part of a previous grid system, and were they being reclaimed? Apparently, the war between Harrison and Tecumseh was a continuation of a 60 years war that preceded all of that. So I think there's a lot more to that story. I think the historical narrative we're given is a thin veneer, and I think we might be looking at the reclaiming of territory. But nevertheless, this video will highlight the architecture of the courthouses of the great state of Indiana. Now this is a fairly large file, and what I've done is included an old postcard and a current photograph if they still stand. I've also tried to note whether or not they were demolished and when. I also have the build date with an approximate population of the town that these were constructed in. And I think as you piece it all together, it becomes quite telling. As for instance, you can see here in Decatur in Adams County, was built in 1872. At the time, the population was 1,000 people. They were building structures like this. And the purpose of a lot of these videos is to lump all of this together, just to give you an idea of how absurd and how unbelievable the historical narrative really is, as far as resources and population go, and the ability and willingness to construct in such a manner at a time when there were so few people. And just before we go any further, I would also like to add this piece of information to the equation as well. This is from statista.com. This is the life expectancy in the United States from 1860 to 2020. So a lot of these courthouses would have been built in this early time period between some even previous to 1860, getting up into the 20s, really. And you can see here the modern life expectancy is around just about 80. And as we go back to, let's just say, the turn of the century, like I often do here on this channel, we see the life expectancy here was 48 years old in 1900, and that just continues to drop as we move further back in time. If we go back to 1880, we're looking at 39 years old being the life expectancy. So I think we need to factor these things in when we're looking at the architecture from that time period as well, how really unbelievable that is. And I understand infant mortality was high, that was a part of it, but that can also be factored in as well to the difficulty of living at this time. Yet they're constructing these buildings that absolutely dwarf our modern buildings in beauty and just the level of architecture. And so we're expected to believe that life was so harsh at that time, but they were willing and able to construct in such a manner. Here we have 1874, Bartholomew County, population 5,000 people. They're constructing courthouses like this. And you have to ask the question too, why is the legal aspect of life considered to be so important at such an early period of time as well, that they're building. Really, they appear to be castles or palaces, whatever you want to call them. A lot of them, anyway. Less than 1,000 people living here in Fowler in Benton County. And here it stands in the modern day, and you're going to see this theme repeat itself as well. You can see what they've done here. They've removed the tower, which is such an often occurrence. And we always get an excuse, like the structure was compromised by some sort of hurricane or tornado, and they had to remove it. And like I've said many times here on this channel, what I think we're witnessing is the scaling back of these structures. If they're not demolished, often they have been scaled back. Here we can see Hartford City in Blackford County, at about 3,000 people living there at the time they decide to build what is essentially a castle out of stone. You just help me make it make sense. And I am sort of targeting the narrative apologists, if you will, people that will jump backwards through hoops to try to make the narrative, the given historical narrative, fit. I think we're well past a point now, with a lot of the evidence I've shown on this channel, that that narrative needs to be thrown out, and we need to reconsider what we're told about history. Boone County, 5,000 people living here at the time, and they build what looks like it could easily be a state capital. And this one still stands. And these are fortresses. These are so well built that we don't even really do that in the modern day. Or if we do build anything close to it, it's quite a feat of engineering, and it's very expensive to accomplish. And you'll see some strange shapes as well. Another thing to take note of is the monuments that often accompany these structures. And often those monuments are a memorial to a war that was fought. My suspicion, after witnessing so much of this, is that these are a part of the taking of the old world, a symbolizing of the clearing out of the remains of the old world and the conquering of it as well. I think that's part of what's going on here. Also important for us to remember the technology that was available, was said to have been available at the time they say these were built. This is 1888. The resources, the ability to transport materials, the skill level of the craftsmen that were involved with the construction of these. This one appears to be demolished, and this would be the modern equivalent of the Cass County Courthouse. So this is illustrates well what I'm trying to show you here, that this type of architecture isn't really as achievable as it once was. And I think what we're witnessing is what we have witnessed is a rewriting of the past, and that this old grid system, what parts of it that were intact, were reclaimed by the New World inheritors, if you will. Here's another modern courthouse to replace this one here. And of course, most of the time, often the modern populations are much higher than the populations that were said to have been there when these were constructed, yet the modern buildings cannot hold a candle to them architecturally, as far as I'm concerned. And some of them will have a progression like this one, Clay County, a second one, and what I suspect is that both of these structures were standing, and the designation was shifted from one to the other. And often we get that in the narrative to provide the illusion that there is a chronological progression where one was built and the next one was built. I suspect that's what we're seeing. Again, you're going to see all these memorials and homages to this, probably American Civil War with the cannons. You see these a lot with the these types of buildings, government-style buildings. And so often these are government buildings. The power structure holds the ownership of this architecture and real estate. Again, take note of these very small populations as we move forward. And the ones that do stand in these smaller cities and towns really stick out like a sore thumb. I would imagine if you've been to these areas, these small towns, cities, I would at least think it would give you pause for thought to consider why on earth they would build these. And I don't imagine they heavily publicized the information as far as how many people lived there at the time. They probably do provide the date, and the way that we are brought up in the system that was created for us has taken away that curiosity we have for how these things were built at a time when there were so few people. This one was built when there was only 500 people living in English in Crawford County, and this one's gone, and this is what has replaced it. I don't think I need to say more on that. I think these are absolutely disgusting. This one built in 1879, 4,000 people living there at the time, and it appears to be gone and replaced with this one. I'm not sure what to make of these, if this is an imitation of old world architecture or a modification of something that once existed before. There's sort of a crossover period. We're getting into more of that Art Deco time period. It's a very confusing time period as you look at the architecture and some of the very short build times. This one's built in 1873 when there's about 3,000 people living here in Lawrenceburg, Dearborn County. It still stands. Look how pristine that thing is. 1873 they built this thing, so don't tell me that these things don't stand the test of time. This one is beautiful, and I'm sure it's been maintained, but it doesn't take that much to preserve these things. And so often we get the case that they're deteriorating, and it was an excuse for the demolition. That story has grown tired on me as far as I'm concerned. This one's built when there's 2,000 people in 1860, very early time period. This one still stands as well, with the tree growing out of the tower here. Kind of strange too, because the postcard depicting a bit of a different brick style finish. So I don't know if this has been refacaded in some ways, or what we're seeing there, possibly. Not sure. Or if the postcard is depicting something that wasn't actually the case. Not sure. DeKalb County in Auburn, 4,000 people living there at the time. You really have to think that the resources were not there. There's no way they were there at the time to construct in such a manner. It would be difficult to pull this off in our modern day. You can just imagine what it would take. And we have the luxury of electricity, hydraulic, internal combustion engines, big diesel engines, things like that. The level of construction technology that increased exponentially at the turn of the 20th century was revolutionary. And to think that all of this was done before that, there had to be something. There has to be more to the story. This one was demolished in 1965. You can see, built at a time when there's only 10,000 people in Muncie, Indiana, and they replaced it with this. Yeah, we'll keep going. Dubois County, Jasper, Indiana, 2,000 people living there. You can see the memorial again in the front. This one still stands. These are impeccable structures. And of course I know some of them are more visually stunning than others, but really no small feat, really, any of them, especially when you go back down the historical timeline on these. And some of these are very early, 1870. This one still stands as well, and again, 1870, you can see the quality of construction materials, and you really have to scratch your head as to what they were using and how it was being used. So the hypothesis here on this channel is that that these are older structures and built by a previous civilization, if you will, with very high quality building materials and technologies that we are no longer aware existed. And then the narrative I provided for you in the beginning is an overlaying of what actually happened in the early years of the founding, if you will, of North America. And I think that's all tied in with the splitting of North America, with Canada and the United States, the artificial line that runs across the middle, the tie-in with the crown, the British crown. You have a lot of Vatican influences here, Jesuit influences. There's so much going on here, but it doesn't take much when you start looking into our past to see how nefarious these organizations really were and are, and that there's a great deception going on. Let's not kid ourselves and say that they wouldn't lie to us about history. They lie to us about everything else. Of course they're going to lie to us about history and paint themselves in a more favorable light. This one was demolished in 1959. We're told it was built in 1867. Couldn't even find a population for New Albany at the time. This is interesting because you can see the new courthouse in the background. You can see what they've done here too. They've preserved some of the columns. They've shortened them, so they've taken a few sections out. You can see how this section does not fit on that. So this one here is quite a bit larger. They probably removed 2 or 3 sections of column there. And again, this is one of those things I think they do just to show you what has been lost. I have had a lot of people ask me, well, what do you think actually happened? And I think we're dealing with a major cataclysmic event that rendered much of the realm a wasteland, a post-cataclysm wasteland, and some areas were relatively untouched by what happened. And I think this has to do with the electrification of this grid system, and maybe some more areas were targeted. There's some interesting stories about places like the Sahara Desert not existing on older maps. Makes me think of the Grand Canyon. There's a lot going on here, a lot that needs to be discovered, but I'm quite confident in saying that much of the disciplines, academic disciplines of our modern day, are cover stories to shield our conscious awareness of what actually happened here and keep us trapped in the lie prison that they have created for us. This one's in Franklin County, Brookville, Indiana. Built in 1878 when there was only 1.5 thousand people living there. How many of those people were women? How many of those people were children? How many of those people were able-bodied and able to construct in such a manner? All questions that need to be answered. And you could rebut that and say, oh, well, these are county courthouses. They pulled all the skilled hands from the county to construct these. I still think it's absolutely ridiculous even if you factor that into the equation. And unfortunately for most of these, they're absolute ghosts in an online search. I don't have construction timelines, and often when we do, they just say it was built in that year. For instance, this one will tell us 1895. We don't get a start to finish date. It's just not provided for us. So it's all sort of lost in the sands of time, if you will. This one still stands. Beautiful looking courthouse. If you live in an area that has a courthouse like one of these, I definitely recommend you going to check it out and see if you can find any mysteries. And if you do, contact me and send me what you have if you get some interesting pictures, whatever it might be. Princeton, Indiana, less than 3,000 people living there at the time. It was built in 1885. Still stands and still looks perfect. It looks like they've removed the statue. You can see a statue here, very commonplace. Going from old world to new world to remove a lot of the statuary, remove a lot of the domes. Bell towers. They removed all the bells too. There's a big story connected with the removal of the bells in World War II. They say they melted them down for for steel manufacturing. I think there's something much more sinister going on there. Marion, Indiana, about 3,000 people living there at the time, and apparently they were eager to build a courthouse like this. And this is a really good visual on what they do to these structures. So you can see they've removed the central tower. This is a spectacular looking dome with columns. How many buildings do you know and have you seen that look like this? Almost like they're missing something in the upper reaches there. I think this is very commonplace. And I think a lot of these towers and with domes were removed early on, and many of them we have no visual evidence that they even had a tower. Often that comes also with a mansard style roof. You'll see that as well in this presentation. 1,000 people living in Bloomfield, Indiana here in Greene County, and again, this is what they do to these structures, looking like it has been mutilated and a pale shadow of what it once was. And the gun just there to remind you. And it looks like Noblesville gets a courthouse in Hamilton County, 1879, 2,000 people living there. This one still stands, and it's an absolute stunner with its mansard roof and little tower intact. This is a good example of ones that often get chopped off and flattened at this line. In this case, it didn't, and it really catches your eye and has got to give you pause for thought. Greenfield, Indiana, Hancock County, built in 1897. We're told this is a castle for all intents and purposes. 4,000 people living there at the time. This one still stands as well. A lot of these preserved. I was actually quite impressed how many still stand. So these are structures we can still visit. I don't know how many you can actually go inside of. I don't know how much you can investigate on these. I know I did an interview a while back now on the Grundy County Courthouse. That interview is in the description. It's called Castle in the Pasture, the Grundy County Courthouse with Jon Butler. Jon did a book investigating his courthouse in Grundy County, Iowa. Ran into several roadblocks as he did his research. It's quite telling, and it tells us more about how much they don't want us looking into the narrative. And he wrote a book on that, and I definitely recommend you checking out his book as well. I'll put links to all that in the description. Harrison County, only 2,000 people living there at the time. This is how they're building. Cannons pointing at us, of course. Hendricks County, Danville, about 1,000 people living there at the time, and they were convinced that what they needed was a castle. This one's gone. This is the one that exists now. Did this one also exist then? Questions that should be asked. Henry County, 1.5 thousand people living there at the time, and they must have had somebody, a French person, that could do this spectacular mansard style tower. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. I think this is all old world reclaimed. It still stands, and it's beautiful and pristine, even though it's such an old structure. These things stand the test of time. And then we get this box. It's trying to look a little bit more interesting, but it's pretty plain and boring, actually. Huntington County in Huntington, Indiana. This one is spectacular again, having that central dome. They retain the central dome down through time. There it is. Wouldn't surprise me if it were removed. Jackson County, Brownstone, Indiana. About just under 600 people living there at the time when they decided to build this spectacular structure. They've since chopped off the top of the tower, but it still stands. And I'll say that again, just under 600 people living there at the time, and they built this. That is a lot of labor. And I'm sure they'll tell us it was built in 1 to 2 years, like most of these. Jasper County, Rensselaer, Indiana. 2,000 people living there at the time. They built a castle in 1895, and it's the centerpiece, obviously, of the town. Why wouldn't it be? Absolutely spectacular, sticking out like a sore thumb. I would suspect many of the surrounding buildings once had much more going on in the upper areas as well, and have been repurposed since as well. Jay County, 1916, only 5,000 people living there. Still stands pristine. Jefferson County, going way back now to 1855. at a time when there's 8,000 people living in Madison. This one still stands as well. Not a bad looking structure for 1855. I would suspect it's much older, like I said. Still in the 1850s, Vernon in Jennings County, population about 600 again, and this is what they built. You'd think they would simplify for the sake of expediency and functionality. You'd think they'd simplify these structures. There's no logic in the narrative that these were constructed in such a manner. There's way more to the story. Greenwood, Indiana in Johnson County. This one was built in 1882, we're told, with a population of about 500 people. They must have had women and children on board for the build for this one. This one still stands. 500 people living there at the time, and this is what they could come up with in a very short build duration is my guess. I wish I could find and provide the start to finish dates on all of these structures, but like I said, very few provide that kind of information. Here we are at Vincennes, one of the early capitals apparently of the Indiana Territory, we're told. This one still stands as well. They say this was built in 1873 with of course the monument, what looks like a bit of an obelisk going on here. We're going to see that theme as we move forward as well, and some of the gentlemen's societies involved, I think, with what they'll tell us is the founding of these places. Literally, they found these places, I think, and claimed them for their own. I think anyone who's looked into this research has a pretty firm grasp of that. There's no mystery there, really, as far as whether or not we can believe the historical narrative. Warsaw, Indiana, 3,000 people, 1882. This one still stands, and it's a stunner. 3,000 people living there at the time. I live in a town of 80 to 100,000 people, and if they were to decide to construct a courthouse like this, it would take half of a decade, and the importing of many skilled hands that just don't exist in our region. And resources, we get to a point where there'd be an outcry from the community because of how much it's costing us to build such a structure. But we're to believe that in the mid to late 1800s there was no such outcry. Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. 1.2 thousand people living in LaGrange in LaGrange County, and there it stands in our modern day. Lake County in Crown Point, 1.7 thousand people roughly in 1878, and they built this three-domed structure. Also still stands and looking a mint, if you will. Absolute mint condition. And you certainly do wonder if people down through time question these timelines and the probability and possibility that these were built. We're dealing with locations, even you can see very small populations. You're dealing with people that are flooding into these regions during these decades with very little knowledge of the history of the places that they're going to. So they're going to take the historical narrative at face value, just as most people do in their modern day. So this has been a process down through time. And it looks like La Porte gets a castle at a time when there's only 7,000 people living there. Imagine all the stonemasons. Lawrence County, 1 to 2,000 people living there at the time. This one looks to be gone, and this is what stands now as the courthouse in Lawrence County. Madison County, check this one out. Demolished in 1972, no doubt a victim of urban renewal. You wonder why they got rid of this. Check out the statues going on in the upper areas here. Clock tower, look at the detail on that. And no doubt they replaced it with a structure of equal beauty. No, just a glass box. With a very plain sign. Oh, they do retain the clock tower though. We come to the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Indianapolis, an amazing old world city. Check that video if you haven't. This one also features in my Demolished Buildings book, I think the first one. 101 demolished buildings. Demolished in 1971, built in 1877. Decent sized population. This is a metropolitan center in Indiana. And there's another look at it, looking like it could be 500 years old. And you can see in the background here, this would be the courthouse that replaced it, while it is being demolished here in the foreground in the 70s. Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis. Marshall County, 2.5 thousand people living there in Plymouth, and they decide to put a tower in the central portion. Again, they retain the tower down through time. So much of this has been preserved, despite the fact that several of these stunners no longer stand. There is much still to see. 1876, 500 people living there in Shoals, and this has definitely been made to look a little plainer than it once did. You can see what's going on up here and what it looks like now. We get to Peru, Indiana. I did cover Peru in a video as well. Yeah, Lima and Peru, I think it's called. 1858 they built this one, when there was 2,000 people living there. Very unique looking structure, difficult construction, of course, very high quality. It's gone, and this was the one that replaced it, we were told. 1910, when they had 10,000 people living there, they had the resources apparently to build a massive dome. Very difficult construction whenever you incorporate any sort of domes into it. Engineering, feat of engineering really. There it is in the modern day. Monroe County builds this one in 1908, we're told, when there was 9,000 people living there. Let's see if they've done anything. No, we still retain the statue work to this day. You can see them in behind the trees here. Pretty spectacular. You can see them here in the postcard as well. You have to scratch your head and wonder why were they incorporating statues into the architecture in 1908. Did they just have that much better taste than us? Are we looking at remnants of the old world, and is it just a thin backstory, like I suggest? Montgomery County in Crawfordsville, Indiana. About 4,000 people living there in 1875, but they built this beauty. This one's a little confusing as well, because you have a time period where there's no tower. And you can see what they've done to the mansard roof here. Let me go back. So they've definitely scaled back some of the decorations and openings on the mansard roof. Made it more plain, looking a little bit dilapidated in the foreground here. Graffiti, and then you also have it with the tower. So I don't know if they put this tower back on. This one actually looking a little smaller than this tower as well. So it's great that they put that back on there. And I would suspect maybe this statue was a part of the original architecture as well. You see that a lot as well. Although here you have the statue as well, so not sure. It could have been something that happened down through time. Martinsville in Morgan County. This one's built in 1857 when there's 500 people living there. And here we have Newton County in Kentland. About 1,000 people living there in 1906. Still stands. With the guns out front again, always with the guns. A reminder of who's in charge, I think. About 1,000 people living in Albion, Noble County in 1887, but they built a castle. And there it still stands in the modern day, looking pristine, looking very bomb-proof almost. This thing's a beauty. Strange looking tower, very unique looking as well. They'll say it's Richardsonian Romanesque, like they say with so many of them. Ohio County, Rising Sun, Indiana. This one a bit of a different look. 1844, very early time period on this one. And there you see the modern day. So you can see it's changed again. The facade is different. Switched over to brick. And if we look a little closer at this one, the oldest in continuous use, we're told. I'll let you read the rest here, but I wanted to show you this as well. And this is what I was getting at earlier with the gentlemen's clubs being involved with the founding of these locations. Orange County, Paoli Built in 1850, this one, at a time when there's less than 500 people living there. This is the courthouse. They just had to put the columns in, didn't they? Owen County, Spencer, Indiana, 2,000 people living there in 1911. But so this is another one of those where the dome almost sticks out like a sore thumb. So many structures look like this without the dome. They still have it to this day. A very unique looking structure now. So you have to wonder what kind of function was involved with putting the central dome. I don't think this is just form. I think that this was a part of the energetics of the old world grid. The dome served a major function with these buildings. Rockville in Park County, built in 1881 at a time when there was 1.6 thousand people living there. They built this, still stands, and it's a beauty. 1.6 thousand people living there. And I will go right to the end here. It's a fairly large file, and I hope I'm making my point, how unbelievable the narrative really is. This one looking a bit run down as well. Pike County, 1868, less than 1,000 people. And this is the modern version. I'm not sure if it's the same structure. I don't think so. We have Valparaiso, Indiana, and Porter County. You can see the statue work going on here. Less than 5,000 people living there in 1885. They were able to put this thing up. This one still stands. Take a look at what they've done to this. So if we follow this line here, it looks like this was boxed off on the top. Let's go back to this one. You can see they've leveled it around this point, and they've changed the top. So not demolished, but for all intents and purposes, unrecognizable from what it once was. Posey County in Mount Vernon, about 3,000 people living there in 1876, and this was the courthouse that they decided to construct to preserve law and order. Now, was the legal system really that important to the people at the time? Or is this the laying of the foundations of reclaiming the structure of the old world and implementing a new legal system? Makes me wonder about the whole, the bar and how it goes back to the City of London, and the legal system and how attached it is to the British system. So it makes me think about Canada and America and how all of that came to be. I think there's a lot more to the story, and we may be witnessing the unfolding of this narrative in our lifetimes here. Maybe we'll get some more truth on what actually happened here. Built in 1905, this one, Putnam County in Greencastle, Indiana. It still stands. Winchester, built at a time when there's 1.5 thousand people living there in Randolph County. Take a look at the tower on this thing. And we're going to see again what they do to these structures. Look at this, looks awful with the mansard roofs. This is what it once looked like. You can see how ornate. You can see the ridge lines with all of the tech on the top have been removed and shingled over. We have some tech here actually still. This is what happens down through time, though. Still beautiful, but not what it once was. Here we are in Versailles. Versailles, I don't know, sometimes pronunciation is different. In Ripley County, 1860, they built this with 450 people living there. Not necessarily a modest structure, more modest as far as this presentation goes, but still quite the feat for so few people living there. Rush County in Rushville, Indiana. At a time when there's 4,000 people living there in 1896, they built a castle. And this one still stands, and it's quite the fortress. Beautiful. And did they simplify? I think they took the dormers off of these as well. So they've definitely changed the upper areas of this one as well. Shelby County in Shelbyville, built in 1852, demolished in 1935. When there was built when there's 1,000 people living there. Just loved those mansard roofs, didn't they? There's the modern box that replaced it. Rockport, Indiana, Spencer County, built in 1919, population 2.5 thousand people, and still stands. No, not too shabby though. 2.5 thousand people living there, and they put this thing together. South Bend, Indiana, St. Joseph County, 1896, 30,000 people living there, and this could be a miniature state capital as far as I'm concerned. Here you have the monument on the property, and I believe the monument is either gone or not within the shot. You can let me know if you're from there. It looks like it's gone. Here they just have the Statue of Liberty out front now. Big story attached to that one as well. Intertwined with the old world research, but there it is, South Bend. Stark County, this one's a castle built when there's less than 1,000 people living in Knox, Indiana. In 1897, building castles, less than 1,000 people living there. I can't say it enough. This is the structure that they were able to complete, apparently. 1867 in Steuben, Angola, in Steuben County in Angola. This one's going way back. This one still stands as well. Cute little courthouse for sure. We get to Sullivan County. This is Sullivan, Indiana. This one's built in 1852, we're told. Less than 1,000 people living there. This one they demolished in 1927 and replaced it with this one, we're being told. Looking very familiar. We've seen quite a few of these now. You wonder if they just served different purposes and if they were just refurbished. 1862, Switzerland County, Vevey, Indiana. 1,000 people living there, and they were just frivolous enough to throw that dome on top. And the higher columns, of course. Columns were easy back in the 1800s. One of my favorites here in Lafayette, Tippecanoe County Courthouse in Lafayette, Indiana. About 15,000 people living there in 1882. More than enough to get this thing done, apparently. It still stands, and it's still a beauty. That is definitely one. If I were in the area, I would definitely go check it out. Look at how many columns they have here. That is just overuse of columns. You have to wonder about the function of columns and domes and tech. These are just weather vanes, they'll tell us. I think there's much more to that. Tipton, Indiana. Tipton County, 1894, population of 3,000. They built this. This one still stands. And it's a stunner. Nice looking building, stone. Looking like some sort of sandstone, not sure. Of course, you can look a little deeper into any of these structures. That's part of the point of these videos, is to bring them all together for you and have people branch off and do individual investigations. But I wanted to bring all of these courthouses to you in this presentation. Union County in Liberty, Indiana. Built in 1890 when there was about 1.3 thousand people living there. Yep, it's a castle. It still stands. Take a look at how well built this thing is. And take a look at the detailing as well that you don't always pick up in the old postcards. So not just that they stacked stone, but they had detailed stone as well. Also looking like it could be 500 years old. Alright, one of my favorite courthouses in the States, in Evansville, Indiana. Built in 1891 when there was about 50,000 people living there. Definitely check out my Evansville video as well. That one will shock you if you're not familiar with the city of Evansville. This one still stands, and it is gorgeous. Looking like it could be right out of the French countryside. One of those chateau-style buildings in France. No doubt they'll tell us that was the inspiration. Beautiful, beautiful courthouse in Evansville. Vermilion County in Newport. With, more of a humble courthouse. Only 300 people living there at the time, so they didn't have the resources, I guess. And replaced by one of these boxy things. Terre Haute, Indiana, in Vigo County. Built in 1884 when there was 28,000 people living there. Also did a video on Terre Haute. You got to check that one out. And this one still stands too, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And you have the monument out front as well, just reminding you who's been in control here since the taking over of the old world. Coming to the end of the file, we have Wabash County in Wabash, Indiana, 1878, 3.5 thousand people living there, and this was what they were able to pull off. It still stands, although I believe they have scaled this one back as well, as you can see. Williamsport, built in 1908, 1.2 thousand people living there. It still stands, still has a dome. Boonville in Warwick County, 3,000 people living there at the time in 1904. Looking again very well built. And this one also still stands. Nice looking structure. Washington County in Salem, Indiana. That's another thing too, is the multiple use of the city names and county names from state to state. Interesting as well. You'd think there'd be more originality with the naming of many of these places, but it seems like there's almost like a again, like some sort of pattern that repeats itself. Built at a time when there's only 1.8 thousand people living there in 1888. And this one still stands too, and it's a beauty. And check out the, what do we have here in the foreground? Some sort of symbolism going on there. This is definitely what they would call Richardsonian Romanesque. Built to perfection. Wayne County in Richmond, 1893, 17,000 people living there. And this one still stands, and it's a beauty as well. So no shortage of courthouses to go see in Indiana. And I have covered other states. You'll have to check through my catalog to see which states I've covered, and I have files on many states, and it's something I am intending to continue to do is highlight these courthouses. So if you enjoy these the spotlight on these courthouses, let me know in the comments, and it'll help me motivate me to make more of these courthouse specials, if you will. White County, Monticello, not sure. 1894, they built this when there's 1.5 thousand people living there. They tore it down in 1974, urban renewal. And they replaced it with this. I don't think I need to say much more about that. I don't want to finish on this one though. There's one more here. Let's check it out. Whitley County Courthouse, Columbia City, Indiana. Built in 1890. There's only 3,000 people living there at the time. Absolutely gorgeous, and it still stands to this day with the cannon out front. So this has been Indiana County Courthouses. I appreciate you being here with me. Until next time. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.